In this episode of the Project Management Podcast, Jeff Furman and I are going to show you how to boost your PMP exam score. Hello and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. This is the live stream for episode number 460, and I am Cornelius Fichtner. Thank you very much for being here. Our topic today, as you can see on the screen, is the PMP exam. And if you are a regular listener of the Project Management Podcast, then you know that I am a PMP trainer, and my company offers PMP training. Therefore, spoiler alert, in this episode, my guest and I will not only help you get ready for the exam, but we will also be mentioning the PMP products and the PMP services that we offer for our students. So please do expect some promotions during the program. And my guest, as you can also see on the screen today, is Jeff Furman. He has been on the show previously, and today we are going to be talking about his new book, Boost Your PMP Score. Learn the keywords. It's that second edition for the PMP exam 2021. The idea behind the book is quite novel, and that will be my first question to Jeff in just a moment. Because when you study for the PMP exam, you'll come across a number of concepts and topics and key ideas, and they all seem to be coming in pairs. So, for example, the project baseline, the performance baseline, they're all related, but not quite the same. And in this book, Jeff gives you not only the list of these, but also an approach of how to make learning these more fun. And now, with all that said, let's see. Let me bring Jeff in here together. There he is. Hi, Jeff. Welcome to the program here. Please tell me, your new book, it is really a workbook, right? And that makes it different than the previous books that you have written. The Project Management Answer Book, it was a question and answer format. And this is now a workbook for PMP students. How did you come up with this idea?
Oh, thank you, Cornelius. Great to see you again. Well, I've been teaching PMP since 2007, actually about 500 iterations of my class. So over the years, I've always seen people sort of struggle with certain concepts and terms. There are so many terms, more than 1,000 now, that people have to know for the test. A lot of Agile was just added, as you all know, in January. So I found over the years, when you show people the terms in pairs and logical pairs, and you also make it interactive for them, this makes it kind of like a fun game, a way of learning and reviewing, but not just slogging through a book, really interacting with the words, really understanding term A and term B, how do they relate to each other? And when you can see that, you're really much more prepared for the test. On the test, which is very time crunched, you really don't want to sit there trying to figure out which one is which, like something like float or free float, things like that, or resource leveling versus resource smoothing, things like that. The more you can nail them down in advance, the quicker you'll be on the test. You're really buying back time to do the hard work of the test of figuring out what the question is asking. So I put this together as an activity. Yeah.
When did you first start doing this in your PMP classes?
Really, a few years ago. I've been perfecting it. When I first started it, I noticed that certain categories like risk management is very rich with pairs. Schedule management is rich with pairs. Agile also. And a lot of times I can remember each pair of terms, I've seen students struggling with them. So I vividly remember as soon as someone learns float, that's kind of hard already. But then when they see free float, it's like their brain can't see and want to absorb another sounding similar but very different term. So really for about the last 4 or 5 years, but then especially the last year with the quarantine, because I've been teaching a lot in Zoom, and Zoom has the great feature that we all love of the breakout rooms. So to make it a game and not just a lecture class, I've gotten into the habit of, so the students really like when I put them into breakout rooms, usually 2 or 3 students, and I say, okay, here are 15 pairs. kick it around with your classmates. So I'll put like Steve with Mary. They'll both be looking at the same set of pairs, but they're in their own private breakout room. Always one person is going to know one of the terms better than the other. It's inevitable. So
Right.
it makes for a great stimulating discussion. They love it, I have to tell you. So you put people together, they learn from each other as a reinforcement of what we're covering in the class. So it's a great review activity. It's really like a game, and it makes it fun, and they really like it, and it's very memorable. Like they'll remember, oh yeah, I said this, but Mary said that. Let's take some notes that we can both agree on.
Before we go into more detail here, let me quickly bring up 2 more slides that I have prepared here. First of all, folks, so if you have a question for Jeff about the book, about the pairs, or if you have a general PMP exam prep question, please do go ahead and do type them into the chat, and we will be happy to answer those questions for you. I hope we'll be able as well to do that. And then second here, I also wanted to bring this up. This here is the book on the right-hand side. It's called Boost Your PMP Score, Learn the Keywords. It's that 2nd edition for PMP 2021. 45 pages long. 8 stars, 8 stars and 5 ratings. No, the other way around. 5 stars, 5 out of 5 stars, 8 ratings, and it costs $3.99. And just one piece of advice: this is the 2nd edition for the 2021 exam. Don't buy the 1st edition, because that was for the 2020 exam. And we'll talk about the differences between 2020 and 2021 in a little while here. So back to the actual discussion about this. So Jeff, so you've already started mentioning that you had these breakout rooms where people would talk about. Is that it, or is that how the activity works, or do you have instructions? What do you tell the students before you send them into their breakout rooms?
So right on page 1 of the book, and if people go to Amazon and they look up the book, it says about the book. So right on that first page that's for free to look at in Amazon, it's really 3 basic questions. So let's say it was you and me in a breakout room. You and I would be kicking around the terms, but not just blindly. Here are the 3 questions. So if we were looking at one of the pages in the book, let's say page 2, but then you would be looking at the book, and if you scroll down, you'll see just up above a little bit, the 3 highlighted yellow. Yeah, they're highlighted in yellow.
Wait, where are we? How to use this book. There we go. Found them. Yes.
So this is page 1 of the book, but also as a nice thing, it's free right on Amazon. When you go to the page, you'll see this. So in other words, 2 people are in a breakout room. They sit down and they look at, let's say, 15 pairs is going to be an activity. So now they have a challenge. In 15 minutes, can we learn the 15 pairs to our own satisfaction? First, you want to ask yourself, do I know the terms well enough to define them? So suppose we're talking about, let's say, total float versus free float, or resource leveling versus resource smoothing. Usually people think, oh yeah, I know one of them. And come to think of it, I'm not so sure about the other one. And especially when they sound really similar, like those 2 examples. So do I know them well enough to define them? Usually one will know them a little better than the other, but they'll be taking turns probably. Also, how are they similar? Also, how are they different? So very simple instructions, and you can do this at home as if you were in a classroom. You can do this by yourself, or you can do this on the phone with a study buddy. Everyone uses Zoom or a Google Meet or whatever. So you go into the book, you look at pairs that you're not sure of, and you just go through them with these 3 questions in mind.
Okay. So let me take you right there, okay?
Yeah.
When you do this, and we do have a question there for Abdul Rahman Sagaf. I'll bring that up in just a moment, Abdul Rahman. So when you do this in the classroom and you have a study buddy, I can see how this works. How would this work at home if I'm on my own, right? I don't really have any input from a second person. Is it still as effective?
Yeah, I think many people prefer to do it on their own because they don't
Oh,
feel like
okay.
they're being tested. So they're doing this like a disciplined way of studying, but it's also kind of a game. It's a go at your own pace. So why don't we scroll? If you go back to the book,
Yeah.
if you go to the first page, let's say just scroll a little more to the first set of pairs, which are going to be
Next page
agile.
here, the
Yeah, right
agile
here. Yeah.
pairs.
So,
Yeah,
for
okay.
instance, as your listeners know, half of the test is now agile. So I start the book with many agile pairs, and not just pairs, by the way, but also triples, quadruples, all of the ones that I found that are helpful for people to learn together as related little logical sets. So, for instance, this is a nice example. These three pairs. You could be doing this at home. So you're looking at your book at home and you say, okay, agile. So today I'm going to spend an hour on agile. Do I know all six of these terms? And it's a very nice, easy way to go at your own pace. You say, okay, I never heard of Sprint Zero, but I heard of Sprint H, or the other way around.
Yeah, for me,
So,
it's the other way around. I've never heard of Sprint H, so learning something new here today. Yes.
yeah, but this is true of everybody. It's like every pair of people in the world is going to know one better than the other. So, for instance, you could tell us if you want what is Sprint Zero. Meanwhile, Sprint Zero comes first. Some people in Scrum like to do a Sprint Zero, although it's optional. Meanwhile, Sprint H is often done at the end. They call it a hardening sprint. So as soon as you think of, well, there's two of them, it's kind of a pair. And then every pair is unique. But like this one is a good one because Sprint Zero comes first, Sprint H comes last. Now I know it forever as a pair. And why does one come first? Why does one come last? There's a strong logic to it. You do the Sprint Zero at the very beginning. It's not the official Sprint 1, but you do a Sprint H at the very end as a hardening sprint, like a solidifying of the software and final testing, etc., final verifications, however you want to do it. But anyway, this is a nice example where they're different but similar, very different really, but yet they go together great as a pair.
You mentioned to me as we got ready for this that your students really like this and this exercise. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that this seems to be such an attractive exercise for PMP students?
Well, it's mentally satisfying to learn pairs. That's the way human nature is, I find.
Yeah.
I see it in my students, like their eyes go, oh yeah, earn value, plan value, SPI, So it boosts the learning, and people feel good when they're learning, especially when they're worried about the PMP test, a very tough test. So it's a very optimistic activity. In other words, you feel good. You probably get endorphins every time there's a little pair that you learn, like an angel gets its wings, because you go, oh yeah, you know what a Sprint Zero is. You never heard of a Sprint H, but when you see them together, it sort of indelibly sets in your head. And so it's mentally satisfying. It's also when you work with somebody else, it's a very fun thing to exchange. You're helping, you feel I'm giving value to them, they're giving value to me. We're both going to pass the test.
Okay. Now, let me bring on a question. You may not know this because this is probably an Amazon technical question here. From Abdul Rahman Sagaf. He says he wanted to obtain the book, but I can't get it from Saudi Arabia. I couldn't buy it from Amazon. Is there a way to get the book? And then he continues. Amazon says the books can only be sold in the USA and they can't bring it to Saudi Arabia. So I do not know if this is a limitation from Amazon, that it's only in the US. Maybe, do you know anything about this?
Yeah, there's two solutions. I'll talk to Amazon today about that. They're pretty good. I can see it. But the first thing I thought of is, and I know Abdul Rahman, how are you? And what I can do is, for instance, in a pinch, I could buy it and he could pay me for the book. I could then give it to him. Amazon makes that option. So you can buy it as a gift for somebody. So that's the easiest way. I assume that would be allowable. But that's a short-term version solution. But anyway, let me see about international marketing. The book is really almost brand new, so I haven't been asked this question before.
Okay, good. Let me take you back to this page here where we have the three agile pairs. Okay, so there's Scrum, there is DSDM, Crystal. I can't even think of all the various flavors that we have.
Yeah.
The PMI has its Agile Practice Guide, right? That's another sort of, I don't want to call it flavor. It really isn't. It's more just a workbook or a learning book about Agile. But there are so many different flavors of Agile out there. How did you decide which terminology to use? Do you use sprint or do you use iteration? Which one is the right one, right?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Well, I am a bit of a potpourri of knowledge because I go to so many events. So I've probably gone to more than 100 Agile sessions.
Yeah.
I got my ACP this year, and I also got my ATP certification this year. So with all of this learning, I'm always learning a lot of Agile for the last 10 years. So meanwhile, I had a very focused study of Agile to get my ACP. You know what would be good here? If you go to the very last page of this book, you'll see resources. So all the way at the bottom, which is page 45, this will give
page
people
40, I think, oh no, page 44. Wait, I have it here.
Yeah, so you could even make it bigger maybe for the people. So these are
now I've lost my place. I have so many windows open today.
Well, it's showing right now. It's just a little small.
Wait.
Yeah, it says sources. Yeah. So these are the main sources I use. Maybe you could scroll
Top
up.
or bottom?
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah.
Yes.
So here we go.
Okay.
A lot of them come from your company, obviously, as a disclaimer, but that's because that's one of my very key resources. So first of all, there's two certifications, the ACP and the ATP, which I got both of them this year to teach the new PMP. Studying the PMI ATP, which is for the trainers to be certified, they give you a list of what are the Agile sources that you need to know for the new test and the waterfall sources. And also when I studied for my ACP, I went through a lot of the same resources. Right. So anyway, this is a list of really good resources that I used a great deal over the last few years, especially recently when I went for my ACP. So the ACP is in the middle there, like your simulator is one of the tools I used, and also the Agile Prep Kit, but not to make it a commercial, but in other words, looking at all of these resources, which I looked at in depth, that's how I got really a lot of knowledge on all of these areas. Like, for instance, your product is up there, the Agile Prepcast. That's one very key resource. But so in other words, that one covers, as you know, all the many flavors of Agile. For the ACP test, I use the PMI ACP simulator a lot, but also just right at the top, the Agile Practice Guide from PMI is a fantastic, easy to read, quick reference. The PMBOK has a great deal of Agile. I like the Andy Crow book. He has a brand new version that I don't think is even on Amazon yet, but it just came out. The PMP How to Pass on Your First Try. It's still the 6th edition, but it's plus Agile. So some of your listeners might want to get his book. Another really awesome book is the Mike Griffiths book. So that's also right on this page toward the bottom. So Mike Griffiths, who has his PMP, ACP, and ATP, those are the ones that I have now, the same three, but he had them a lot earlier. Mike Griffiths' book is really fantastic. PMI ACP exam prep, that's for the PMI Agile test, but they really cover the same Agile areas. So by the way, for your listeners, the most heavy emphasis for the ACP is 4 flavors of Agile, and you cover those, and Mike Griffiths' book covers them. In other words, you cover them in the Agile Prepcast. You also test those very heavily in your PMP simulator, and also, for that matter, in your ACP simulator. So the simulators aren't just tests, they're learning tools, as you know very well. So I learn a lot when I just do practice questions and study the rationales. Okay. Anyway.
Allow me to stop you here, because thank you for all that marketing. Okay. I have a change request for the 3rd edition. My name, I'm a PMP, I'm a CSM, but I am not a PMI ATP, and I wouldn't know what a PMI ATP is to start with. You completed the training for being. No, I have not. I am not a PMI ACP, so that can go. The one thing that surprises me, however, is this. The Scrum Guide is not on here. Did you not use the Scrum Guide from scrumguides.org as one of your resources and input?
I actually, there's a lot of resources. I never got to that one, but I know a lot about Scrum.
Yeah.
I studied a lot of Scrum before I wrote my first book, the Project Management Answer book. I studied a lot of Scrum. I've gone to many sessions in New York. There's a group called New York City Scrum. So I go all the time. Now they're by Zoom, but I go into the city outside of the quarantine. I've gone to many Scrum sessions. So I know a lot about Scrum. Partly you could say osmotic learning, but really from many seminars on Scrum.
It's not specific on the Scrum Guide, but you have the Scrum background. That's probably in here. All right.
Yeah.
So enough about the resources here. Let's see. Let's take a look at a few examples here, right?
Yeah.
So some of the terms where you saw benefit into putting them into logical pairs. Which ones do we want to talk about and show to our audience?
Yeah. Why don't we go back to page 2 first for a little bit more about Agile?
Page 2.
Way up at
Here
the
we
top.
go. Page 2. Yep.
People love Agile. It's the new thing. It's taking over, and it's all good stuff. It's all good tools. So, for instance, each pair is unique. Information radiator and information refrigerator. Have you heard of both or just radiator?
Just the radiator.
Yeah.
The refrigerator, that seems to be a place where you, without ever having heard of it before.
Yeah.
That's the place where you put your information and then it just freezes over and nobody looks at it ever again.
That's exactly right. So but the thing is, that's part of the beauty of the pairs. As soon as I do this on purpose from my experience teaching like thousands of students. So just like your reaction, I've seen that reaction in other students. So it's like, okay, they maybe know information radiator. Then if they can figure out the other one, they feel smart about it. And now they're set for the test. So Cornelius just figured out the other term really exactly right. And that's pretty good. So in other words, real fast without even looking at a book.
It had to be the opposite. I'm now definitely going to have to look it up because, I don't know Sprint H. I don't know the refrigerator. I'm also not 100% certain about the gulf of evaluation, but I can imagine what it is.
But the cone of uncertainty.
Bring up another question or another comment that we have here. Zachariah says, let the person who ask for the book contact me, please. So Abdul Rahman, if you happen to know Zachariah, you can get in touch with him. You're on, Abdul Rahman is on YouTube and Zachariah is on Facebook. You could probably connect together. But Zachariah also asks, this question is for me, do the long tests on the Prepcast have breaks? No, Zachariah, they do not have breaks. We have not yet implemented that. What we are going to do is we are most likely going to be doing a workaround. So what we're going to be doing is currently the exam simulator has 230 minutes in duration. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding 12 more minutes to that. So you will have 252 minutes. There is a rounding difference. That's why we wanted to add 10, but we can't. It's either 9 or 12 because of the rounding difference. And so what our simulator will do is it'll give you 252 minutes, and there will be a message before you started telling you, please take a break, 10-minute break after 60. Please take another 10-minute break after 120. So you are going to have to manage that time yourself. In the long term, we want to implement this as part of the simulator, but right now we do not have this. Okay, there we go. Tamara says something that I'm pretty sure many people will say. I just took and passed a new exam last Monday. None of these terms were mentioned. Not surprising, Tamara, because the PMP exam is this wide. You can't even see my arms, right, going all the way. There is so much you need to know, but it is only this deep. Right? During the exam, they can only ask a certain amount of stuff of you, right? And I'm not surprised when you say, I did not see any of these terms here. Other students will come back and say, oh yeah, I just took the exam and there was a question about Sprint Zero. So do not be discouraged if you go, I've not seen these, yeah? So not surprising there. Damara asks, which resource did you use to prep for the test? I'm planning to sit for the exam tomorrow. If you wouldn't mind responding in the comments, that would be perfect. All right. Okay.
Well, I would add for tomorrow that we have only scratched the surface. There's hundreds and hundreds of terms in my book.
Yeah.
We
How
are
many
only
do you
looking
have in the book? Do you know? Do you know the exact
something
number?
something like about 300, I believe. So,
Oh wow. Okay.
and I'm always adding to the book. So, and when people get it, they can do an update and just get the new version for free. So that's a
Right.
nice benefit. So if
Yeah.
someone gets the book today, they can update it the next time I do an update. But as Tamara is asking, we are only on page 1, the first 3 pairs out of really hundreds of pairs, not
Right.
terms. So I actually have quite a lot in the book. And I have passed the PMP and the ACP, so I know a lot about what is on the tests.
What next page shall we go to?
Well, why don't we stay here? You were asking about this. So again, you know what cone of uncertainty is, but you don't know about gulf evaluation?
Yeah, let me again try it. So while the cone of uncertainty kind of says this is how far out my uncertainty goes, gulf evaluation is kind of like how far out and how deep and breadth and width do we want to evaluate something?
Well, that's a good guess, but in this case, that's not correct. But it's a tough one. But anyway, the gulf of evaluation is a funny one. It's the difference between what does the customer really want and what is the team's understanding of what they want, and that is a gulf. And that's
gulf between those two, of course.
So
yes.
That's pretty good because we all like to think we know we're really good with communication skills. We think we're really good at listening, but in fact, there's often a gulf. What are we providing to the customers? Is that what they want or not? So that's part of the idea of sprints and incremental products is you're trying to constantly be checking in and updating what are we giving them, what do they want. But anyway, there is a name for that, and it's a good one. It's the gulf of evaluation. And it sounds a little like cone of uncertainty, but it's different. So this is a funny pair. They're not really related, but they go together in your head. It's kind of satisfying do I know one? Do I know the other? Oh yeah, now I know both.
Yep.
So
one moment, please. I'm going to type in a better link here. https://pmexamsimulator.com. So our colleague Shannon just typed in a link for the exam simulator. Let me give you the better direct link here. So I'm just typing that in. So here you go. Better link for the exam simulator. This is the direct link to the exam simulator. The link that our colleague Shannon just gave you, that is the link. Sort of, we have multiple places where you can get the simulator. The simulator is here. And the reason why we're doing this is because Tamara said this. Cannot stress enough how helpful the simulator was. There we go. And the best link to the exam simulator is pmexamsimulator.com. That's where you can best and fastest get to it. More pairs.
Yeah,
what other pairs do we want to look at?
Let's go to page 35. This was one of the...
I knew you were going to say that. I have it already queued up here. Wait, double click. There we go. Page 35. We're going to planned value, earned value, and all of that. And let me just say, before we look at this in more detail, based on some of the feedback that we've had, based on some of the feedback from the current PMP exam, I know that questions about earned value are on the exam. Not specifically you have to, calculate earned value, but you have to know and understand what this means. What is a CPI? What is a CV? What is an EV? And based on that information, there is a scenario, and you have to make the correct choice based on your understanding of EV, CPI, SPI, PV, and all of these acronyms. So back to this page right here. Let me zoom in a little bit.
Yeah.
So this is an important page that you definitely need. That even Tamara probably knows that this was on. Hey, Tamara, let me ask you this since you've just taken it. Did you have questions about earned value on your exam? And please do not be specific. yes and no is sufficient. We want to stay very high level. We're not allowed to talk about any details on the exam, but a question like, did you have questions about earned value is fair, and PMI doesn't mind us asking that. Jeff.
So this set actually maybe gave me the idea for the book. Even a very long time ago, I started having the book idea brewing in my head, because earned value is a tough topic and you have to really learn it from the ground up to understand it. But one day I realized it wasn't in any other book. I saw, there are 6 and 6. There are 6 key formulas. There are 6 key inputs. So if you scroll to the next page a little lower, you'll see the 6 key inputs. So when you have the 6 key inputs, which starts right here, so those are in 3 pairs, and the key formulas are in 3 pairs. So it's not a way to learn earned value. It's a way to review, make sure you understand it really well. So you need 3 inputs, which actually go with the triple constraint. There are 3 inputs, 2 for cost, 2 for time, and 2 for scope. And then, so there are the 3 inputs on the next screen, and above them are the 3 pairs of formulas.
Yeah, this is...
Yeah, right. Why don't we stay right here?
Right,
so there, yeah. So once you learn there's a 6 and 6, that kind of gets burned into your brain. So there's 6 inputs and 6 formulas for earned value. It happens to work out that they both break down into 3 pairs. So here we're looking at the inputs that you need to do any earned value calculation. There are 2 for time at the top, total duration versus the moment in time. Then there are 2 for cost, budgeted at completion, and I say macro and micro. So these 3 pairs, there's a macro and a micro. So it's a little bit more than just a list. It's saying, do I know the macro for duration, and do I know the micro level? Where are we now? The same for budget at complete versus actual cost. The big number and the small number, the where are we now in the project. And the same with deliverables. How many total deliverables, like am I building 6 mini malls, but how much percentage have I completed so far? So all 3 of these pairs are all you need to know to do any earned value problem. So when you read a test question, you can just remember to yourself, I'm looking for these 3 pairs of inputs. And once you have them, you're going to see them in the test question, even if it's a math question or even if it's a concept question. There's only 6, and there's 6 and only 6. Here they are. So by the way, people used to do the brain dump on paper. They love doing this as part of their brain dump, the 6 inputs and the 6 formulas. Even today on the new test, you people probably know they can do the brain dump on the slide share. You can do that. You have the screen, the
whiteboard,
Yeah, the whiteboard option when you're taking your Pearson VUE test. So if you just type in real quick, here's the 6 inputs, here's the 6 formulas, you're ready for any basic earned value question, whether it's a math question or a logic question. So if you scroll back up, higher up to the 6 formulas, people will see also, oh yeah, there's 6 formulas. They go perfectly in 3 pairs, just like the inputs. So there's planned value goes with earned value. They're kind of opposites. The same thing with SPI and CPI, the same thing with schedule variance and cost variance.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's a way to say, I know I'm ready for the test when I can quickly write down these 6 formulas, whether I have to do a lot of math or a little, it varies on which random questions everyone gets.
Okay. Let me bring Tamara's comment back in here, because she has answered my question when I asked about, did you get those on your exam? That's exactly correct. Little to no questions requiring calculations, so very few formula questions where you have to actually do a calculation. However, it is important to know the definition of formulas to answer scenario-based questions. And then she continues, 1 or 2 questions about earned value, but did not need to calculate it. This is basically the feedback that we are getting from the exam. So very good to know there that, knowing this, knowing the definitions, understanding how to use these terms, here, the formulas, and then on the next page, understanding this here as well. This is important for you to know on the exam, right?
Yeah,
Do you want to look at some other pairs?
Yeah, so let's go to an important pair for the new test. Besides adding Agile, there's a new way of looking at the material. So it's no longer just the PMBOK with the knowledge areas and processes. So if you go to page 43, this is a really good page.
New domains.
So
here we go.
So 43, and this happens to be a 3 and 3, but it's good to know. And I also included right from PMI these numbers. So here are 3 things to know about the new test. Instead of, or in addition to really the 49 processes, the new test in 2021 is broken down into process, people, and business environment. It's nice to get very familiar with these 3, so I make it a nice little page here. There's process, 50% of the test. People is 42% of the test, and business environment is 8%. So this is really good just to keep in the back of your mind as you're studying. This goes with the exam content outline. So this is just a nice, oh, by the way, this is a triple. And another triple is with the new test, they look at domains, then tasks, then enablers. So you might not have heard of enablers. This is just another way to look at the PMI material, but it's the way that they're going to be testing you. So you want, even if you already took a class, you want to look at the exam content outline and then look very specifically for which do they consider domains versus tasks versus enablers. Very good to know. It's really good to study the ECO, and as Cornelius always tells everyone also.
Yeah, and if you are interested in more about these 2 pairs, triplets rather, these 2 triplets, then check out my live stream and podcast episode on the 2021 PMP exam, because we're going into these people, process, business, and the domains, task enablers in more detail over there. But since we are at triplets, you have more triplets, you also have quadruplets, and you have quintuplets, right?
That's a very good segue there. So that's a real good one. And let's go to page, let's see, let's find some of the triplets. Yeah. So if you go to page 36.
Here we go.
So yeah, there are a lot of triples also. So as soon as you see this, you'll say, holy cow, there are a lot of terms that I've been trying to learn. Once you see them as triples, it's much easier to learn them. The triple
weak, balanced, and strong matrix, of course, yeah.
There's a lot of them because, and I've taught so many classes that if you can learn, there's 3 types of matrix: weak, balanced, strong. By the way, a funny one about that is one of my students pointed out, if you go up a tiny bit, like an inch.
One moment.
WBS, this is just to help your people. Some student of mine once said, oh, WBS, and I didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah, weak, balanced, strong. Look at that.
But this is like work breakdown structure. So there's a lot of acronyms. I sprinkle some of those in also in the book. So for this triple, here's an acronym, by the way, that you might not have seen before, that weak, balanced, strong is like the WBS. So once you study that a little bit, you're going to know it forever. And especially through your test. And then there are just so many. So if we just scroll straight down, we'll find some more good ones.
Scrolling isn't working here today. It keeps jumping back to the top of the screen. It's annoying me to no end.
But so here are 2 pairs. Here are 2 sets that go together. And this is one where I've seen people have a lot of trouble with over the years of teaching.
Yeah, there's scope and performance baseline. Yeah.
The scope baseline and the performance baseline, that's a pair, but each of those pairs breaks down into 3. So I feel like the Count on Sesame Street. I love pairs. So in other words, these are pairs. The scope baseline, people learn what are those 3? Why are they a triple? Why is it very important logically to update all 3 of those in triplicate? Meanwhile, performance baseline is a tougher one, and that includes the scope baseline. So I put these together in the book on purpose because inside the performance baseline is the scope baseline, schedule baseline, and cost baseline. That's pretty difficult, really. But when you see it as two sets of triples like this, it's just a really good way to study. So this is
better, doesn't it? Yeah.
So then you think, so why is the scope baseline part of the performance baseline? So then you say, okay, scope, schedule, and cost baseline, that's the triple constraint. Meanwhile, those three baselines make up the performance baseline. So there's the triple constraint, there's these three baselines, put them together, that's the performance baseline. And then, by the way, usually people will already have learned the scope baseline first. So a little bit building on that is the performance baseline as a triple. And when you scroll down a teeny bit more, you'll see scope baseline, schedule baseline, cost baseline. Well, that would be the third one if it was really inside the book. Then we get to each one of these. Each one of these is unique. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. So each one of these is unique. 3 levels of estimating is a very clear 1, 2, 3. I think you lost the page from the book there.
I intentionally brought this up here just as a reminder for everybody that we are talking about Jeff's book, Boost Your PMP Score, Learn the Keywords in Set, second edition for PMP 2021. It's available on Amazon, and the link has been provided in the chat here. But what I also want to say is if you are taking or thinking about taking a PMP course in 2021, then don't forget my company offers PMP exam prep courses. Please do visit pmprepcast.com/PMP. This time here, today is, the 1st of February. The February and March courses are up on the website for registration there. And thank you, Shannon, for posting the link just now, both on Facebook and YouTube. Okay, back to you, Jeff. If I can find the window again.
So that was
so many open today.
But anyway, it's page 36 if you wanted to do it fresh. But anyway,
page 36.
So we're back in the middle of all those triples.
Yeah, I'll open
and then here are some triples.
Yes.
And then the next page is some more good ones. Maybe you want to pick one. So these are interesting because 3 levels of estimating is a really good one. This is right in the PMBOK, definitely, which is still valid for your test.
Yeah.
This is a triple that I like to number as 1, 2, 3. Why would I do that? Can you guess, Cornelius? Why would I number these 1, 2, 3, which doesn't always help, but here it helps. Sometimes they really.
I think it looks like really a top-down kind of a thing.
Yeah.
First, you do a rough order of magnitude. Yeah, it'll cost about $1 million. Then you have a preliminary estimate. It'll be somewhere between 800 to 1,200, well, 800,000 to 1.2. And then the definitive estimate, it'll be between 950 and 980. So you're getting more and more definitive.
Yeah. So this way, if you learn them as a triple, which they are, they go together, but they're also in order. So when you're just by nailing this down as a triple, now you understand the logic of why are there 3 levels of estimating? What are the 3? And they are done in this sequential order. Similarly, sometimes they go together in order, sometimes they just go together really well. So the next little set comes from quality management. There are 3 kinds of quality sampling. Some of your listeners might know 2 out of 3 or might know all 3, but this is a way of putting them together. Suppose somebody knows, maybe they could guess what is statistical sampling, but variable sampling versus attribute sampling, that's kind of hazy words. They sound a little similar.
Even I would have problems clearly defining them, right?
Yeah.
So, it's kind of there in the back of my mind, but for the full definition, I would have to look it up.
Yeah, so that's the thing here. Like some of your people right now, they could take a screenshot. So they take a screenshot of this page, they print it on paper, they go look in the PMBOK or whichever is their favorite source, and they say, what's the difference between, I know Andy Crow's book does this really well, what's the difference between attribute sampling versus variable sampling and statistical sampling? So once you learn them, you learn all 3, you make sure you know them really well. If you're working with a study buddy, you kick them around with your study buddy, but like are they similar? Are they opposites? So attribute and variable are kind of opposites a little bit, but very closely related. So if someone listening gets a test question, we're doing this kind of sampling, we're measuring, is there any lead in the water in Flint, Michigan? Is it yes or no? So if it's yes or no, is that a variable sample or is that an attribute sampling that we're doing? And it doesn't really jump out at you unless you know which is which. So you look it up. I like to teach with a lot of real life examples. So let's say we're talking about we want 0 lead in the water in Flint, Michigan. It's taking forever to get it perfect. Meanwhile, if we're looking for 0 versus any, is that attribute or variable sampling? And
let me go out on a limb here. I would say attribute, because the attribute is either yes or no.
Yeah, exactly. But many people don't know that, and many students, English isn't their first language, and it's just those names. But very good.
Right,
so
yeah.
those names aren't completely obvious, right? So attribute and variable, I don't know. You have to really, you don't want to be going through that thought process on the test, especially if there's a multiple choice or right in the question. It might say you're working on a project and as part of quality management, you've chosen to do attribute sampling. You have to know very well which is which, and you don't want to waste time on the test trying to figure out which is which. So these 3 are great as a study page, like a little checklist. Let me just go through you could use my book as a checklist. You could say, let me make sure I know each and every pair in this book, and not just pairs, but triples like these. Some of them are, and we'll see some of those. We could go further. These are also all good. Like, in other words,
we're at about 45 minutes here. One thing I wanted
Why don't we go further then?
One of the things I wanted to do before we move on is I wanted to bring up the sales page that we have here on Amazon, because you chose to do this through Kindle Direct Publishing. Right. And as you can see, the book is really terribly expensive at $3.99. Why did you choose to do it in this form?
I've done books with publishers and I've enjoyed the experience. The biggest benefit of working with a publisher is you have an editor to work with you, but the biggest disadvantage is it takes a long time. Right. So I wanted to do an edition to help people in November getting ready for the test before it changes. Then I immediately had another edition ready to go in January. Actually, the week the test changed, I put up this new second edition. So
this is the first edition that was out earlier. Right?
Yeah.
And then you've been able to update it very quickly.
Yeah, well, I had it already going. So in November, I put out the first edition, which was really strictly waterfall. I knew a lot of people would be testing. I actually had more students passing the test in November and December than any other 2 months in my career, I think. So everyone, they were saying, I better nail it down. So by using Kindle Direct Publishing, or there are similar competitors, I was able to just kind of publish at will. Like even every month or so, I can update it, put in as much new terms as I may have learned from reading a new book, and then I can update it. And then whoever bought the second edition can always get the new edition for free. So if you like speed and immediate gratification, as we all do, self-publishing is kind of the way to go, I'm finding. So for my first book, it was a 500-page book. I was very lucky to have. Yeah, and that's still very helpful to people. But in other words, for a big 500-page book, a really good editor makes a great difference. But for this book, it's kind of a quick book. It's pairs and triples and quadruples. I can easily add. Yeah, I mean, I don't really need an editor, and I don't really need a graphic artist. So, and I even used, my wife took this picture of my dog with me at the beach. So in other words, you can Kindle Direct Publishing. The biggest advantage is you can quickly put it together. You can publish it today, and it'll be available the next. You can get it out in a day or two, and people can also get free updates, which is a fantastic benefit. If you've ever done anything and you wish you could go back and change it a little, this is a great way that you can change it for free, and your customers can get the new one for free.
All right. Let's begin closing this out, Jeff. How would you recommend that people use the book for their PMP exam preparation? Is this something that you start out at the very beginning and you work your way through? over the course of 6 to 8 weeks. Is this a book that you would use more towards the end? Or is this a book, however it fits into your learning style?
Yeah, it depends on the background. So, for instance, many of your listeners today, they probably know a great deal about waterfall and the PMP from their studying so far. So, for many of your listeners, Agile is probably new. So, for most of your listeners, I would say, whenever you want, it could be the first take you get the book. Take a look right away at all of the many agile pairs, triples, quadruples. Take a good overview of all of the agile terms. Then when you pick up a book like the Scrum Guide, the ACP Guide, the PMI Agile Practitioner Guide, all of those are good, whichever one you like, but it's good to have a heads up. So if let's say you read, here's 100 agile pairs, how many don't I know? You could print it out and just put little check marks. I know this, but not that. Then go into really learning from a textbook. Then use the book again as a checklist, as you're studying, checking off, here's what I know. Every time people use your simulator, let's say, suppose they learn a term or they have trouble with it, they could go back and use my book as a checklist. A really good way is print it out, use it as a checklist early and later on to verify what you know and still need to study.
Okay, so there are multiple ways of how you could use your book.
Yeah, and a great way is with a study buddy also. You can do it with a friend. I like that way a lot because I've seen people like working together with it.
Yeah. So, final question for you. What would you give students who are preparing for the PMP exam at the moment, for the new 2021 PMP exam, as your number one tip for the new exam? What should they be focusing on? What is important for them to do as they prepare for the 2021 exam?
I think having a good benchmark of where you are at before you take the test is good. It's good to put the test on your calendar so you gear toward it like a marathoner. I know I'm going to take the test April 20th, but don't take the test until you're ready, and you know you're ready when you're getting good scores like 70 to 75% on your practice questions. So it's kind of becomes a no-brainer. If you're getting a high score, once you hit a point where you're getting a high score, that's when you're ready, but don't do it before that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Wonderful. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the program today. And I want to bring your book back up here one more time. So it is Jeff Furman's new book, Boost Your... okay, let me... you can't even read it because of the logo. Now you still can't read it. Let me see. Can you read it now? There you go. Okay. Managed to get it in. Boost Your PMP Score. Learn the keywords in sets, second edition for the PMP 2021. It is written by Jeff Furman. It's 45 pages long. You can get it on Amazon, and it only costs you $3.99. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on the program today.
Thanks a lot, Cornelius. Great to see you and your listeners.
All right. And that takes us to the end of today. So please visit pm-podcast.com for show notes, transcripts, and PDU information. Our email address is info@pm-podcast.com. And finally, we have this. This time, it's a meme with Gene Wilder. So, he says, you're a project manager. Well, you must be really good at forwarding emails. Until next time, bye-bye, everyone.